So let's see. We are sitting here on March 9th. Next Wednesday will be the 16th. So then the next Wednesday, we may not necessarily have news out of spring practice, but it'll be 2 to 3 days in the mix at that point.
Yeah.
And we'll see how Brent Venables conducts spring practice as compared to Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you can count on, and I know all coaches are a little bit, I think, creatures of habit in terms of they don't want to allow too much access, just because there's so much technology out there and there's so much, just kind of ability to share some of that information that you don't necessarily want to be shared. But I do think that Oklahoma, the mainstream media will have a little bit more access than probably, what they've had in the past, and a little bit. I think the two things that you noticed out of the previous regime was that one. Riley was very, what I think he was very unwilling to let much many people, if anybody, in to watch practice and be around that. But I think also he was very paranoid in terms of, what he might say. So it was very, very um, even above and beyond coach speak that you would see. And I think the one thing in listening to um, to some of the speaking engagements that Brent Venables has been a part of, whether it be the podcast or whether it be kind of media availability or whatever that might be. He's very, I mean, again, he's gonna hold a lot of things to himself, but I think at the same time he's more willing to just kind of be honest and say what the state of his team is, and if he's happy, if he's unhappy, where do they need to have some improvement. So I would expect us to have a little bit more intel, so to speak, than we've had in the past. So yeah, look forward to that. It's, like I said, there's you can go, and I think this can be said, I think, for any spring, but I think more so this year because of all the newness. You can go into any positional unit and kind of talk through, you know, that there's going to be key battles, and in a lot of the different positional groups, specifically because of all the turnover from players, and whether it was players moving on from a transfer portal perspective, whether it was players moving to the NFL or whatever that might be. So yeah, there's a lot of intriguing areas to kind of think about and talk through when it comes to the spring practice.
And it sounds like, Jason, based on some of the feedback we get from the strength and conditioning program, that some of these players may show up and look a little different.
Yeah, I think so. I think the one of the prevailing comments that I've heard is the staff is over and above thrilled with the buy-in that these players have provided early on. And so I think what's happened, and it'll continue to kind of ramp up, and the winter workouts aren't anywhere near as strenuous and tough as the summer workouts are going to be. Part of it's weather, right? But I think other parts of it is, it's a slow kind of ramp up to what that will look like. And so, no, I think you're right, Mark. I think you'll see, and I don't know how much it'll be seen in the spring game, but I think definitely when you start seeing some of these kids in the fall, it'll be much more apparent. But yeah, no, I think, and there's a few kids that Venables and team have even pointed out as, kind of separating themselves as more leaders on the offense and defensive side. Dylan Gabriel has been one that's been mentioned. Eric Gray has been another one that has been mentioned. Interestingly enough, one of the guys on the offense that's been mentioned is the transfer from Cal. Caden Tower is one of those. He's the 3-year starter for Cal, and kind of expected to fill one of those roles on the guard, the offensive guard for Oklahoma. He's been a guy that's been pointed out, and then you've got some guys like Justin Broyles that's been there for a while. Not extremely surprising, but he's a guy that has improved so much, and he got on the field quite a bit last year. So some of these guys that have it's kind of interesting that some of these guys that have been transferring in. I mean, you kind of expected a little bit from a quarterback perspective. You kind of expect that. You expect that guy to be the leader of the offense, and so I think it's no surprise that Gabriel has kind of separated himself, but I think it's really interesting to see some of these guys, be, and I think based on the way this was, it was I used the term before, and I think it was something that was used. That I think it makes sense. I think when you look at it, and it's more so kind of a country club atmosphere. You saw that some of these kids, from everything that I've heard, the last few years, or some of these kids would finish their workout, and then they'd be done, and then they would dancing around and playing around, and it was just it's not as disciplined, not as regimented as it needed to be. So I think that's one thing that you're going to see from this team this year is I think you're going to see more of a no nonsense approach. You're going to see more of a tough approach, and I think you're going to see more of a mentally a stronger team than you've seen in the past, and much more aggressive, much more physical at the point of attack on both sides of the line.